We officially hit the quarter mark of the NBA season at halftime of Wednesday's game. So the question everybody has, is Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner going to make the All-Star team? An early look at where the Magic's two stars rank among the league, plus how expectations have changed in Orlando. We'll get to that on today's episode of Locked On Magic.
You are Locked On Magic, your daily Orlando Magic podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And you are indeed Locked On Magic. Today is December 6th, 2023. My name is Philip Rossman. I'm the expert and site editor over at OrlandoMagicDaily.com. Of course, follow me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. On today's episode of Locked On Magic, we're at the quarter mark of the season. We're about 2 weeks away now from the opening of All-Star balloting. So we're going to think, where do Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner sit in the All-Star race? We'll talk about that. Bigger extension, talk of where the Magic sit in the playoff race and how expectations have indeed changed this year. We'll get to that coming up here in just a moment. But first, we want to thank you again for making Locked On Magic part of your day every day, no matter when you listen to us, whether it's first thing in the morning, whether it's right when we upload. We truly appreciate you making Locked On Magic part of your day every day. Remember, there's a great Locked On podcast covering every single team in the NBA. To search for Locked On and the team you're looking for, the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Magic is brought to you by friends at Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. The Orlando Magic are back in action tonight against the Cleveland Cavaliers, and you can catch every play of the Orlando Magic's 2024 season on the SiriusXM app. Get the hometown broadcast with our friend Jake Chapman on the SXM app. Just search for Magic. You could also check me out. I will be on the PSF app watching the game live. So watch along with me, bring your questions and all that. I'll be watching the game with another Magic fan as well. We will have that on the PSF app. Download it today. We are still a little ways away from thinking about All-Star Weekend. All-Star Weekend in February is kind of going to come much faster than we think, 3 months away. We still got a whole quarter of the season. So a long way to go before we really get into All-Star thinking. Balloting doesn't even open until December 21st, I believe is what I read. And we have about a month there of balloting. We're under no impression. Both Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner are not going to get voted in as starters. The Magic aren't even on national TV until All-Star week. So at least for now, maybe that'll change. Maybe it won't. But we obviously know that they're not going to start. Jason Tatum, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Joel Embiid, those are your front court starters. That's not going to change. Who starts at guard, I think, is up for debate. I think Tyrese Halliburton's certainly going to put in a very strong candidacy. And obviously the in-season tournament game on Monday night will help that. Jaylen Brown's in the running. Tyrese Maxey's in the running. Damian Lillard's almost certainly going to be starting. Us worrying about All-Star Weekend is we're not going to have to worry about that till the coaches vote in late January. I believe voting closes January 21st or somewhere in the January 20s. We'll get the All-Star reserves coming in about a week after the starters are announced. Coaches will get their chance to vote, yada, 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 yada. That's just how it goes. So yes, we are very, very premature here, but we are at a nice little dividing line. Halftime of Wednesday's game against the Cavaliers is the quarter mark of the season. The Magic could put themselves in a very good spot. We're going to talk a little bit about how that's changed expectations for this team. But we also want to think, okay, where does that put our two stars, our two guys? Where do they rank? Kenny Smith gave the Magic some love on the TNT broadcast for Tuesday's in-season tournament games, talking about the New York Knicks, saying they're always going to have the second best player on the floor. Now, I don't think that's quite accurate because Jalen Brunson is certainly an all-star. But Kenny Smith said, look, Paolo Banchero is better than any player on the Knicks. As our friend Wealth God said, well, Franz Wagner is also probably better than any player on the Knicks. I don't think that's the case. I think Jalen Brunson's very good. But having said that, Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner certainly have as strong an all-star case as Julius Randle, who had a very nice game on Tuesday, despite the loss. The Magic are very much in the conversation. And that's the point I want to drive home today. Whether Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner make the all-star team, we are still a little ways away from thinking about that and from really worrying about that. I think both are very clearly on the bubble with how they've played so far. Their entry into the All-Star game is going to depend on how well the team does. So the Magic sitting at second in the Eastern Conference, one of them is getting in. If the Magic slip, like we're probably expecting them to fourth, one of them is getting in. Will both of them get in? I find it hard to believe the coaches will reward two young players and give out that many first-time All-Star appearances, because Tyrese Maxey's probably getting in. Mikal Bridges might be getting in. But again, the point of this exercise, the point of doing this is simply to say Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner very much are in the conversation. I want to repeat that. The Orlando Magic have two young, homegrown stars who are very much in the conversation to make the All-Star team. And if both make it, it would not be surprising. Like I said, I think Jalen Brunson is probably in. I think Mikal Bridges is probably in. Bam Adebayo is probably in. But Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero are not too far behind. Here are the numbers to back that up. Franz Wagner is averaging 20.7 points per game, 5.8 rebounds per game. Solid numbers. Paolo Banchero is averaging 19.5 points per game, 6.9 rebounds per game, and 4.9 assists per game, with improvements with his efficiency, the biggest knock against his Rookie of the Year campaign, all across the board. I'm not here to say that both will get it. I think, though, absolutely one of them will. Could they get in over Jimmy Butler, over Jaylen Brown? That's the most likely. Over Julius Randle? Very possibly. But there is a spot for them. If you just look at the front court players, the way that's split up, Jason Tatum, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Joel Embiid are your starting front court players. They're it. You got to have two front court players, or you got to have three more front court players, and then obviously 2 or 3 wild cards. Mikal Bridges and Bam Adebayo feel like pretty safe bets at this point, but you're looking at a player pool of Mikal Bridges, Bam Adebayo, Jimmy Butler, Franz Wagner, Paolo Banchero. That's 5 players for 3, maybe 4 spots. And I'll throw Julius Randle in there. So that's 6 players for 3, maybe 4 spots. The bottom line is this. Franz Wagner and Paolo Banchero are both playing at all-star levels. That is a big reason why the Magic are on the win streak that they are. We saw Franz pour in 3 straight 30-point games last week. Paolo Banchero was the Eastern Conference Player of the Week 2 weeks ago. They are both extremely capable. Both were nominees for Eastern Conference Player of the Month. Again, how much efficacy can we put in that process? I don't know. But the bottom line is this. It's real, folks. The Magic's ability to compete at this level, the Magic's ability to compete as a playoff team, that part of this equation is real. And while certainly we're not maybe going to the fans and saying, vote for our guys when the time comes, because it's going to be hard to displace Tatum, Giannis, and Embiid. That's not happening. Especially with how little the Magic are on national TV, they're still very much in the background. But, again, you got Pascal Siakam, you got Scotty Barnes in there, maybe too, but the Magic's record will force the coach, the coaches will note the record. The coaches will look at the standings when the time comes in late January and reward players on teams that are winning. So I'm not worried about Pascal Siakam. I'm not worried about Scotty Barnes. I'm not, particularly worried about a Zach LaVine or a DeMar DeRozan. They're going to reward players on winning teams. And the Magic are going to be a winning team. And if that's the case, Franz Wagner or Paolo Banchero, if not both, will be in the All-Star game. will be playing on the Sunday in Indianapolis, not the Saturday. Paolo will play on the Saturday too, probably, or guaranteed to be on there the Saturday if he wants it. But they are likely to be playing Sunday too. And that'll be the first sign that the Magic have arrived at a higher plane. That one of their two young guys, if not both, make their first appearance in the All-Star game. This is a big thing. This is a big change for the Orlando Magic. And as we sit here at the quarter mark of the season, it's important to take that step back and realize how far this team has come and how much things have changed. Because expectations for this group have indeed evolved. And it's worth pointing that out and asking how we should measure this team moving forward. We'll get to that coming up here in just a moment. But first, it's time for a quick word for our friends over at eBay Motors. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long. Whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you players who are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So let's see who Josh has picked out this week, picked out for us on this week's eBay Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Players of the Week. The big name that I am seeing on Josh's list comes from the team that the Magic will play on Friday. So I offer a little bit of caution. In this weird week where everyone's playing only 2 games, Killian Hayes of the Detroit Pistons is starting to stand out. As Josh says here, it feels like Hayes may stick as a starter in Detroit, at least for the short term, and he brings strong assist and steal numbers. But be careful if you're picking Killian Hayes, because he's coming to Orlando, where the Magic are 9-1 at the Amway Center, coming off a 6-game win streak, a perfect 6-game homestand record. The Magic very much could need a win against Detroit on Friday, and a more focused defensive Magic team after a couple of days of practice, a game in Cleveland, that could be a dangerous mix. So I would hold off on Killian Hayes, maybe go with some of his other options, like Patrick Williams, who could be starting in Chicago with the potential for trades coming for them, or Obi Toppin, who's just on the stat-heavy Indiana Pacers. Josh Lloyd from Locked On Fantasy Basketball is going to help you win your fantasy championship, and eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. It's the same with your vehicle. With more than 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof racks, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Don't forget to check out the brand new 24/7 streaming channel that Locked On has launched. It's the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, actually, on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel today. So we're at the quarter mark. We're roughly at the quarter mark of the season. We'll be naming our first quarter MVP. We'll probably talk about that next week when we have a little bit of time between games, since the Magic play Cleveland on Monday, then don't play again until Friday. So we'll have some time to digest and consider some things. We'll name our first quarter MVP. We'll go over some questions we have for the next 20 or so games of the season. But we're at the quarter mark of the season. And obviously, things have changed for the Magic. Like, I don't think we can debate that anymore. This Magic team has changed. What we expect of this Magic team has changed. And I am a big believer that, yes, you have your preconceived notions from the start of the season. And you remember those. You remember those goals. But as you begin to learn and understand your team, you adjust a little bit. It's not that you abandon or give up on how you define success or give up on what you thought at the beginning of the season. But now you're taking in some new information. Now you're thinking about things a little bit differently. Now you're looking at it and saying, okay, Now we understand a little bit about this team. What can they actually do? What are our actual expectations? And almost certainly, I think every Magic fan has raised the bar on what they thought this team could accomplish this year. That's what they did in going 14-6 and winning 9 straight games and dominating at the Amway Center. Like I said, they're 9-1 at the Amway Center. They're 9-2 overall at home because the Atlanta game counts as a home game. They're not losing at home right now. This has been a dominant defensive team for the most part. Top 5 in the league in defensive rating. They're top half of the league in offensive rating right now. This is a team that has proven to us that they can be a lot more. I mean, shoot, we just spent 10 minutes talking about how the Magic do potentially have 2 All-Stars on the team already. Not coming, not soon to be, not will be, current. And that inevitably is going to raise the expectations. That inevitably is going to make you think, maybe this team can accomplish more than I thought they could. I want to warn about getting too far ahead. Like, will the Magic finish second in the East? Probably not. We know that this next 20-game stretch is going to be one of the tougher stretches of the season. Through this West Coast road trip they have in early January, the Magic are going to face a lot of challenges and a lot of difficulties. They got Cleveland twice in the next 2 weeks. They got Boston twice next weekend. It's going to be a battle. Everything's going to be a battle for this team. And that's part of the fun. And that's obviously part of the challenge and part of the journey that this team is going on. But make no bones about it. Even realistic people like me are ready to say the bar has been raised. It's time to expect more. At the beginning of the season, I predicted this team to finish 9th in the Eastern Conference. I predicted them to make the play-in tournament, have a home play-in game. Whether they actually made it to the playoffs or not, I was certainly uncertain about it. I think I had them at 42 wins, if not, in that range. I was like, this is a 500 team. We're going to go through some ups and downs. We're going to go through some struggles, and we'll see how they look coming out on the other end. That expectation is obviously too low. And y'all would be upset with me if I held them to that standard. And we're going to talk about standards here in a minute. Y'all would be upset with me, and I'd be upset with me if I held them to that standard after what we saw through the first 20 games. They showed us in these first 20 games what they are capable of. That they are capable of winning even when they don't have their best. They are capable of winning with offense. They are capable of winning with defense. They will defend their home floor. They can hold leads. They can take leads. They have proven to us how good they can be. Now, are they the second best team in the East? Probably not. But are they a top 6 team in the East? Are they a team that should expect nothing less than the playoffs? Absolutely. This is a team that's taken care of its business against bad teams this year. They don't really have that many bad losses on their record. Like, maybe the Brooklyn losses you could claim are bad losses because that's a 500 team. But look, one of them's a schedule loss. One of them was a no-show. So, that first Brooklyn loss was the worst loss of the season. They've shown us they can beat good teams. They took care of the Nuggets. They took care of the Celtics. They stared the Nuggets down in clutch situations. They won late games. They're 6-3 in clutch situations this year, guys. Like, it's not like they're losing these close games. The Magic clearly are a team that can compete at a higher level. And so, frankly, the play-in isn't going to be enough anymore. Frankly, the Magic aren't a play-in team. They are a playoff team. They're a playoff team. Just say it again. They are a playoff team. And nothing less is going to be acceptable now. And that's good. That means we've raised the bar. That means we've said, okay, you've shown us how good you can be. You've shown us what you're capable of doing. You've shown us what is possible. And now you have to do that every single day. Now you have to do that every single game. Now we're expecting you to be that way. You're kind of cursed with your own success. You're burdened by your own success. This Magic team has shown us that they are good enough to compete. Now, are they good enough to win in the playoffs? That is a fair question to ask, and one we can't answer because we've never seen this team in the playoffs. I am still expecting whatever playoff series, just like Sacramento last year with Golden State, and yeah, they forced them to 7 games, but they had home court advantage and they had to fight for their series against a veteran team. And obviously, no shame in the way that they lost in that game 7. That would be a fine outcome. Orlando just wants to get there. And that remains the goal for this team. We saw through these first 20 games that they can be an excellent defensive team. And that is obviously the expectation and the bedrock of everything that this team does. We've seen Paolo, Banchero, and Franz Wagner hit an all-star level. And we have every reason to believe that at least one of them will be in the all-star game. And both of them will be in the conversation. That has to continue over the next 2 months. We've seen Cole Anthony emerge as one of the best sixth men of the year. We've seen Jalen Suggs emerge as a all-defensive team candidate. All this stuff has to continue. And they have to build on it. And again, I will credit the Magic. They are not hiding from any of it. They recognize that they have to peak in April, that they're not supposed to peak in December, that there's still a lot more work to do. And of course, it's still on the Magic to do all that work. Plain and simple. It's still on the Magic to do all that work. And ultimately, we will see if they are able to do it. That's what the next 60 plus games are for. To do that, to get that work in, and to see just how this season turns out. Obviously, we are expecting more from this team now than we ever did back a couple months ago. A lot has changed in 2 months. A lot can continue to change in 2 months. But the Magic have largely showed us what they look like at their best. And now we just want to see them keep getting better. That was actually the theme at practice on Tuesday, really the theme at practice over the last 2 days. We're going to chat a little bit about what the Magic are working on and how they're trying to get back to their standard. We'll get to that coming up here in just a moment. But first, a quick word for our friends over at Gametime. Magic back home at the Amway Center on Friday. It's a City Edition night against the Detroit Pistons. Game on Monday against the Cleveland Cavaliers. We're going to get the home games dotted. Bowl season's right around the corner here in Central Florida. Gametime is your ticket to the game. You should never have to worry about when you're buying tickets to your next event. You really shouldn't have to worry about getting those tickets, what it's going to cost, or what the seat's going to look like. Gametime solves all those problems for you. They're the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the best price guarantee. Gametime takes guesswork out of buying tickets. Look, Gametime is obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. With zone deals, you pick the section and Gametime picks the seats for an average of 18% savings. And the Gametime guarantee means you'll always get the best price if you find tickets in the same section and row for less. Gametime is going to credit you 110% of the difference if that happens. Download the Gametime app today and take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. The Orlando Magic got a second day of practice in, not a lot different from Monday. You know, we went kind of deep into the defense and how that slipped on Monday. Really, the focus these last 2 days was to get back and kind of tighten the screws on the things that they had let slip in the last week. And it really was just the last week. I think it's 4 of the last 6 games, Magic have given up more than 115 points per 100 possessions. The Magic got to get their defense right. And look, their offense, especially at home, especially against bad defensive teams like Charlotte and Washington, the offense was able to flow, was able to find its groove, it was able to score plenty of points. It scored 130 points in those 3 games. But against Brooklyn, on the road, on a back-to-back, that offense didn't travel. In fact, that is still one of the bigger issues and one of the bigger questions this team faces. Their offense does not travel. Their defense largely does. It didn't Saturday, obviously. But their offense is not traveling. And I think that is quietly one of the bigger issues that this team is trying to resolve. At the end of the day, we're talking big picture issues here. And I know this is something that I've hammered home over the last week. Even when the Magic are winning, it's not about wins and losses. It is about wins and losses. They need to win more than they lose. But those kinds of games against a Washington, against a Charlotte, no offense to them, isn't about the final score. A lot of fans would say, oh, we want to see this team blow them out, get out easy, do all that. First off, there's no easy games in the NBA, so that doesn't technically exist. However, what you're really saying there is you want to see the Magic play to a standard, because if the Magic play their style of basketball against those teams, especially, they're going to win. And they're going to win the way that they want to win. And look, it's great that the Magic were able to outscore them. You're not going to discount a win. Wins are good. Winning is always better than losing. And obviously, you'd rather win ugly. And as Mo Wagner put it after, I think, the second Wizards game, you want to win. You want to win however you need to win. If the game calls for you to win away or the defense isn't there, something's got to pick up. But the question for this Magic team is, what is it that we're going to rely on when we need it? And that's obviously their defense. And so practice on Tuesday was spent, or practice these last 2 days were spent trying to get the team's standard back.
Well, I'm glad you used the word the standard, because that's what it is about. Like, obviously winning, feels great. And there's also the other side about what is our standard? How do we want to play? Are we doing the right things? Because there's going to be games where you can hit the standard and not win the game. And then there's going to be games where you don't hit the standard and win the game. So I think there's so many pieces that we have to continue to look out for, but we want to make sure that we're always hitting our standard no matter what happens as a result of the game.
Get back to the details. We could feel it falling off. We understood what was happening. I think it was a dope challenge, to continue to figure out ways to win. When our defense is not up to standard, and I think we found ways to do that, and we were adaptable, but now we get back to, our identity, what our standard is, and that's excellence on that side, and continue to play the right way on the other end. So, this was a good 2 days of, no games, just rest, preparing, getting details fixed, and, getting ready for this tough stretch.
You heard both Jamal Mosley and Jalen Suggs say it there pretty plainly. The goal is to get back to the details that made them so good. The rotations on point, individual defense and individual responsibility on point, everyone in sync. And that's just been knocked off kilter a little bit. It's not that the Magic are playing poorly. It's not that the Magic aren't doing necessarily the right things, but it's been knocked off kilter. It's been knocked a little bit out of whack. And that's the part the Magic are trying to fix. That's the part the Magic are trying to correct. That's the part the Magic are trying to push forward and get back on track so they can be the team they know they can be. At the end of the day, that's what this is about. Players have already talked about it. They're already looking toward April. Why are we talking about the All-Star Weekend? Because this team is already thinking big like that. And All-Star Weekend is a fan-driven thing, so we'll think big from the outside on fan-driven things. This team is already thinking big about what comes next for this team. And it's all about that standard. You'll hear players say it. It's all about that standard, about who we are, what our identity is. Jalen Suggs has really said this really, really well. We got to get back to playing Magic basketball. And look, it's great that they beat Washington and Charlotte the way they did. Being able to do that's a valuable skill. I'd rather know they can do that than not. But they're not going to win games that way. The loss to Brooklyn proved that. They're not going to win games if their defense doesn't show up, or games of consequence, I should say, if their defense doesn't show up. Even in the Denver game when their defense wasn't great, and Denver's a great offensive team, so their defense was pretty good, their defense made plays and stops down the stretch. Obviously, Orlando hasn't been in a close game while their defense has been struggling the last week, but they know they're going to need it. Cleveland tonight is a tough opponent. Boston next weekend is a tough opponent. You want to pummel teams like the Pistons on Friday, you got to defend them like you mean it. Just demoralize them. And the way the Magic, frankly, have been demoralized in some games over the course of the last 2-3 seasons. This is what it's about for the Magic. They got to get back to playing their basketball. And they hope these last 2 days in practice tightened those things up, got them back on the same page, and enabled them to play the defense that we know they're capable of playing. I want to thank you all again for listening to today's episode of Locked On Magic. Of course, find me on Twitter at @PhilipRR_OMD. Subscribe to the podcast and Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Himalaya, Google Play, Spotify, Odyssey, and all of them still on podcasts to your podcast enabling device. For latest on the Orlando Magic, be sure to check out OrlandoMagicDaily.com. You can follow us there on Twitter at OMagicDaily. Be sure also to check out my Patreon page, the Orlando Magic Hub. Go to patreon.com/Orlando Magic Hub. There you'll get full practice reports with full details of everything going on at Magic practice, as well as my instant reaction from every game. If you want that live as well, you can check me out on the PSF app, watching the game live. We'll have conversation on there as we watch the Magic take on the Cavaliers at 7 o'clock. If you can't make it there, be sure to check out the local Magic radio broadcast on the Sirius XM app. Just search on the SXM app for Magic, and you'll hear the call from Jake Chapman every single Magic game, their home broadcast on the Sirius XM app. That's what we'll talk about tomorrow, though. We'll talk about the Magic's game against Cleveland Cavaliers on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Magic. So until then, for Orlando Magic Daily and Locked On Magic, this has been Philip Rossman-Reich. We'll see you all again next time for another episode of Locked On Magic.